Now, some of you might say that why is it said, especially in Advaita Vedanta, that suffering stops? Is suffering also not the will of consciousness? It's a very valid question. Why do we focus on this end of suffering, or almost 100% end of suffering? Why is this an important notion in Vedanta? It is because in the design of this play, unless there is this egoic identity, unless there is a belief in this limited self, the play of this aspect called suffering cannot happen. Because suffering is not a pure energetic appearance. Like we can say anger can be looked at as a pure energetic appearance. Something happens, something feels attacked, anger comes. Now, how to make anger into resentment? Can you do it without mixing egoic belief with that? How to make not just anger into resentment? How will you make an action that happened? Suppose you shouted at your children. Yeah? Some shouting happened at your children. How will you make that movement into guilt? Can you do it without mixing egoic identity, mixing the false into it? How will you make something said which helped another one in a great way? Suppose you were just with someone and something was said and they really said, "Oh, thank you, that helped me so much." How will you convert that movement of appearances into pride? You cannot do it without mixing the I concept into it. So suffering is just a play of all of these B grade emotions, as I call them, which means that you take this pure emotion, which might be sensation, which might be coming, mix it up with some thoughts about yourself, and then it becomes anger, becomes resentment, appearances become guilt or pride. So suffering is just a generic name for all of these B grade emotions. It's a generic name. When we are experiencing any of these, we seem to be experiencing any of these, we say that this is suffering. Now, as more and more you're becoming empty of egoic belief, you're coming to the pure insight about what you really are, then to pick up this individualized I thought becomes more and more of trouble. And you already saw that guilt, pride, resentment, regret, remorse, uh, any of these suffering, qualities of suffering that we spoke about, not possible unless you mix up some sensation with the individual I thought. That is why it is seen that those who have come to this discovery and more are letting go of the false conditions about themselves, they come to the end of their suffering. Just like saying they come to the end of guilt or pride. Of course, everything always was the play of consciousness, but we are talking about now the mechanics and the design of consciousness itself in its apparent play. And it seems to work in this way that unless you pick up the notion of a limited I, you cannot play with experience such as guilt and pride, resentment and guilt. That is why it is said in Vedanta over and over again that you come to your end of suffering only in your true recognition of who you are. Now, yes, like every notion, there is a downside to this notion also. The downside of this notion also is that suffering comes to an end, is handed over to the seeker identity, the rampant seeker identity called the checker guy, or at least I call it the checker guy, which is then uses that itself, like the mildest appearance of any sensation, and says, see, you're still suffering. And thereby enhancing egoic belief and therefore enhancing suffering itself in the play. See? So when it's handed over to the ego itself, that suffering must come to an end. then it can become a terrible notion. Therefore, this statement, this end of suffering, must be just an innocent statement of what you're finding about the play of this life. It must not become a column in your report card. Because you will say, use concepts like, I should no longer feel guilt to make yourself feel guilty. So, so one is a report of how the design of consciousness or the functioning of this play works. And the second is the notions of trying to get there or trying to come to it forcefully, which itself seem to amplify the trouble. Are you hearing? Are you hearing what I'm saying? Because it's a bit subtle. If your hands are truly open, then this notion of suffering will seem more and more alien. If they are closed, if there is resistance, if there is just conceptual understanding, then it might seem like suffering still perpetuates. And if suffering still seems to perpetuate, don't then feed yourself also that at that time the notion that suffering must end. Just remain empty of notions as possible. It is important to present both sides of this to you, because there are many who will present just one side and that might cause confusion on that side. And I know that especially those who have been in satsang long enough now are able to see this from both perspectives.